Last session of the day, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us to talk about coaching. I know it's a topic that's top of mind for many folks. Nice and warm in here. We got the top floor. But listen, this is going to be a really exciting conversation. A lot of familiar faces in the room who are really passionate about coaching, where we are from a coach development, coach education perspective. I'll share a little bit here about me and the role I do and sort of set the scene before our panelists introduce themselves. I will say that this session is going to be, we're going to use a lot of visuals and we're going to be interactive. So we're going to invite you throughout this session to comment, feedback, connect with each other. So just expect that. I don't think there will be a lack of participation given the topic. But a couple things about this session. The first thing is really to say, a lot of amazing work's been going on in coaching. Folks probably saw the Million Coaches Challenge piece happening yesterday. Some amazing work happening there. Lots of scholars and folks who've been really passionate about this field for a long time. I'm excited to see the work come into our space. I personally got into coaching through graduate study here at UC Berkeley. I studied education here and was really interested in the role of coaches in education and youth development. As our wonderful group, yes, we're going to get nice and tight in here. So I really look at this work from the perspective of, how do we continue to inform our work through research, through evidence, but also through really thoughtful ways of thinking about the problems. And one of the things that we can say about coaching is, and we've said this a lot, you probably heard this, coaching is a really fragmented system. It's really fragmented, many amazing programs and experts, but often disconnected, siloed. And the siloism and the disconnection is one of the core issues that I'm interested in trying to figure out how to solve, so that we get more aligned thinking. I think the question that guides me and guides us and will partially guide today is, how can we continue to bring the work of managing, educating, and supporting coaches into alignment? Think, how do we get our sports, our states, our sectors to start really thinking in shared and aligned ways in terms of the practice, not just saying coaching matters, not just saying we need better coach support, not just saying we need more training, which we do, but actually producing tools that help us start doing that work together. The challenge, of course, is that the US is so big and there's so many different contexts that the way we do that has to be done in a way that appreciates our contextual difference. Not all the sports are the same. Not all the regions are the same. There's plenty of seats up here, by the way. You can sit right in front next to me if you want. So how do we bring the work into alignment? And what I propose, what we're going to sort of introduce today, and I've talked a little bit about as mapping tools. I call them sense-making tools. How do we engage in a shared sense-making process that allows us to avoid the problem of one-size-fits-all approaches, but share principles, share assumptions, share potentially language in ways that produce coherence and people moving in the same direction, but doing it in a way that works for us. And I think that's a really important part. Producing tools that help us do this work that works for us. So our goal from a coaching perspective increasingly is to produce value-neutral tools that work for any context. It can work nationally, it can work locally. It can work in a sport, it can work in a school. And I think you'll kind of see what I mean as we start to go through this session. And we have an amazing panel who represent diverse contexts and ways of thinking and entering into the coaching problem. We have NGBs, we have LMS platforms, we have education programs, and everyone is gonna explore how they enter into these issues. I will say this as a last point before we allow them to introduce themselves. Kristen, you're gonna laugh at me. So there's a group that we're really interested in here, and this group is the audience that we're thinking about increasingly are the people who are responsible for youth coaches. We call them pricks. Yeah, PRYC, you're a prick. So raise your hand if you're a prick in here. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. You're a person responsible for youth coaches. And what does that mean? Maybe I'm an administrator, maybe I organize and facilitate opportunities, maybe I'm responsible for recruiting, maybe I'm responsible for evaluation, but I have a responsibility to a group of coaches in some way, right? And I've been that. I spent a very solid 5-6 years running a very large coaching organization that had 50 teams in New Zealand. And it's hard work. So with that, let's welcome our panel. Round of applause. You've already heard me talk, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia Pelton. I am with the Tucker Research Institute on Girls and Women in Sport. We are the first of its kind. We are 36 years old. We are the global leader, so anything that really touches girls and women in sport and research comes through us in some way, shape, or form. I am the program director for Coaching Her, which is a program that comes from the research, and it is a toolkit that upskills coaches on coaching girls in creating inclusive, safe, and welcoming environments to try to keep girls in the game. You might have heard earlier at one of the earlier sessions talking about body confidence sport. That is part of Coaching Her. And we have 6 foundational modules. We have body confidence sport. We're moving into menstruation. And our goal is really to get girls engaged in playing, to keep them in the game, to create the next generation of coaches and support those coaches as leaders in how you support them.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. My name's Cam O'Riordan. I'm from etrainu. We're leaders in e-learning, education and training. So we have the privilege of working across national governing bodies, youth sporting organisations globally. Here in the US, I do have a funny accent from Australia. We work there in Australia as well. Also the UK and New Zealand. The nice thing about the work we do is we have a view across national governing bodies globally and are able to bring those views and support to governing bodies, youth sporting organisations, clubs and organisations we work with. We have a mission to build exceptional communities through education, and everything we do every day, we sort of empower that, and we really like to partner with organisations and embed a learning culture inside organisations, and that's what we're really passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here. Jake Weiss, Director of Research and Insights with the United States Tennis Association. We're the national governing body of tennis in America with the mission of growing the sport of tennis to inspire healthier people and communities everywhere. And in our work, we care about all of tennis that's out there. So that includes fandom and players and facilities, but maybe the most important one of them all is coaches. Coaches drive so much of the play that takes place, and as we try to grow the sport, we need to make sure that we're building relationships with coaches. We know what they want, how to connect with them, how to educate them, and how to get them involved. So a lot of the research we're doing and that we'll talk about today is how we look at this vast coaching landscape, both from the lens of tennis, but also one that can be applied across all sports.
And I am Anthony Vitale, and 25 years ago this week, during spring break, I started my journey as making golf my career. My high school golf coach let me know that in order to get better and to be a bigger part of the team, I needed to get better at golf. And there was a great opportunity for me to work at a golf course, providing me free access to golf. And that really kicked off what has been a 25-year journey of falling in love with the sport. And I now work for the PGA of America. We're a member organization of 31,000 men and women golf professionals that work in the game and serve the game in a variety of ways. And teaching and coaching is one of our largest and probably our quickest growing aspect of the PGA of America. And I oversee our coach and athlete development work with a team of individuals that are dedicated to growing both youth participation and lifelong participation in the sport. As a lifetime sport, we have a few advantages over the life cycle that some other sports may not have. And so it's really important for us to capture active youth early on because of what it can mean for the sport for years and generations.
Yeah, I think there's one of the cool things I've learned and just didn't know about PGA of America was just how much coach education and coach development you do. And I will say that golf has got some great organizations. Also, the First Tee group does a great job. There's a lot of folks really passionate about coaching and supporting the people who coach. So we've got an awesome panel, and just for those who are arriving, just as a little kind of note, so there's going to be a lot of we're going to do some visuals here. So the visuals are going to show up on the screen. So I know some folks who are kind of on that side, hopefully you're still able to see. The goal here is producing visuals that we think of as value-neutral sense-making tools. So these are tools that allow us to think about aspects of the coaching ecosystem that sort of, in theory, apply to everyone, and can be applied in again, a value-neutral, context-free way so that you can make them work for you, regardless of where you are. So let's start with the first one. One of the first questions, I think that we want to kind of look at is the setting for coaching. Okay, and I'll walk you through what's happening here. Some have seen a version of this before. This is kind of an updated version. And we're going to have Jake kind of comment first on a few things. But one of the first things that I think is important to remember when we think about youth sports coaching is the question of where and with whom am I coaching? What is the environment in which I am engaging in the coaching practice, right? And the reason why this is an important place to start is because we have to recognize that coaching is a practice. It's a practice that operates in a setting. That setting, whether it be a school, a club, a youth program, the backyard of your home, a camp, a lesson, a professional academy, that matters in how the person coaches. And so when you look at a framework like this, what you see obviously is a diversity of settings. That is a hierarchical category. You also see age-based organization within each of those. So some of them are, you'll see sort of this notion of coaching kids, early adolescents, teens, in other cases, adults. I think one of the interesting things to think about, and I know both for PGA and the USTA, a lot of coaches coach adults and children in the same day, which is an interesting coach development phenomenon. And so what are we hoping to achieve with a framework like this? Well, start us thinking about who the coaches are and where they're coaching. So Jake, I'd love for you to kind of kick us off here because you really live and breathe. You do so much work in trying to understand the people who coach, where they coach, who they are. Can you talk a little bit about how USTA thinks about these kinds of things?
Yeah, and I love this visual, Vince. When you look at this, if you take a look on the right, that's where a lot of our conversations happen traditionally. When we talk about the coaching space, we talk about those certified traditional pros, those people who are doing this full-time, living and breathing this sport. And so we've done a lot of work and really put great emphasis on understanding this audience great. But we know that there's so much more to the coaching space out there. And this visual, as you look to the left as well, can help demonstrate that. There are so many people involved in community and youth programming and in the backyard play. And the people who are coaching and facilitating play in all of these areas are coaching for different reasons and need to be treated differently. You cannot give the same person who has dedicated their entire career to become a full-time coach the same education, the same messaging as we do the parents who are trying to inspire to volunteer time during the week after work or on the weekend to get involved with their kids, or the people in the community who are doing this. And so we've done a lot of work to understand the different audiences here. And so one of the big things that we've dove into is away from those professional coaches, but looking into the parents out there, the ones who are already teaching their kids sports, teaching their kids tennis, and those who aren't, and trying to think, how can we get you more involved in the sport? How can we get you engaged with your kids? And one of the big barriers we see around this, and I know tennis isn't alone in this, but is this lack of confidence in this space. And it's really a big part of this expanded landscape of why these coaches aren't involved or why they're not doing more and spending more time. And one of the really interesting things about the research we've done is one of the first questions we would ask these people in these conversations we've had. We just let them self-identify as a coach. Are you a coach? Do you coach tennis? Yes or no? And we would see that over a third of our parents who are coaching their kids and our volunteers in the community don't identify as a coach themselves. But then when we talk to them about the activities they do and how they're involved in the sport, they're talking about teaching someone how to play the game, bringing someone out on court for the first time, facilitating a program. Those are coaches. Those are the people we need to connect with well. And there's this huge gap between the way, and tennis is as guilty as anyone by calling our people pros. We've called our coaches pros for so long, and it isolates this huge group that is involved in the sport, wants to be involved, especially in the youth space, who doesn't feel confident at the moment or have the resources to be involved.
And Jake, I want to follow up on a couple things because I think there's a couple really important little nuances here. One is that one of the adjustments we've made to this framework is that this backyard play as a context for coaching, right? We think of background play and we're like, hey, that's kids in the backyard playing. But ask you, how many of you have children who you coach in the backyard? Okay. Do you view that as coaching? Okay, right? So it's interesting because this is like some nuance, right? Are we saying, you guys are sort of going down this path of saying this is a setting for coaching, this is a population we need to think about as coaches or as engaged in coaching, but that doesn't mean we approach them necessarily in the exact same way as someone who self-identifies and is formally volunteering as coaching, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we know too that that's the first step, getting that backyard play, getting mom and dad and the guardians and caregivers to play with their children, get involved in sport, is that first step for them to feel empowered and coach in the Little League team or AYSO or any other organization that's up. So giving them the right information, and we know that's not going to be going through all these facilitator workshops and dedicating weekends and hours on hours in training for this. But what is the bite-sized format? And one of the really interesting things too, when we connect with this group, the ones who are already in the space, and we say, how do you know what to do? How do you know how to coach? And it's always my own playing experience, or I watch YouTube videos. And so how can we ensure that we're connecting these people with the right videos, the right bite-sized information to go, so they're delivering the sport we want them to?
And last question for you. I think this is less about the segment and more about just that you are a very data-driven organization. And you really believe in capturing data about the people who coach, the people who might want to coach. I know you do a lot of surveying of college students as an example. Can you just talk more broadly about the relationship of how you think about coaching and how you use data to inform that?
Yeah, and so it's really helpful for us to identify and group the different types of coaches. We have our current coaches, our former coaches, and our potential coaches, those who out there already have some involvement potentially in the sport or in sports in general with their kids, and how can we get them more involved. And so some of the ways we use data is like one of the research studies that we did showed that parents who play tennis, if they play that sport, their kids are 4 times more likely to play that sport themselves. And that data shows this emphasis as we try to grow the sport as a whole. And we know that there is a population here. If you can target the existing playing population of parents' ages to get involved in coaching, get involved in their sport, their kids are going to be more involved as well. And you have this multiplier effect of growing these healthy, active communities. And none of this is unique to tennis. We're in the benefit that it's a sport you can play your entire life, but you can shoot hoops with your kids in the backyard. You can play catch with them. You can kick a soccer ball around. And so knowing that this audience in particular there's such a clear connection. If the parent is involved, the kid will be involved. Finding those parents first and connecting with them to help grow and then get more kids active is huge.
I think it's great. I'd love to open it up to the rest of the panel just to kind of comment, react. What does this make you think? Yeah, jump in.
I'd love to share some data. I'd love to share some data coming from the Tucker Center. So we look at that right there. And what that doesn't tell you is that only 2% of the coaches who coach boys and men are women, and less than 50% of those coaches who coach girls and women are women. So we are not meeting them where they are at, and we need to do something different. And we need to design something different and kind of welcome those coaches in. So I'll give you an example of some progress that we're making is that if we think about NFL flag football right now that's happening, it's a new sport. It hasn't been defined by anything yet. It's the first time we have a new avenue for girls to actually come up in this game and open a pathway for women as well. So we're looking at how our data wants to determine who's coaching these girls and how do we then see what they need, because it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same. We don't want the same anyway because we see that girls' participation is low and women in leadership roles are low. So we need to change something. So we're looking at this data. Who are these people that are going to coach? How do we welcome more women in? How do we meet them where they're at? How do we give them the skills and the confidence to join there, because nothing's been defined yet? And then that way, those girls that are going to participate, and let me tell you, 50% of the girls who play flag football right now, it's the only sport they play. So if we can keep those girls in by offering and letting them see women in leadership roles, we're going to change the game. So we're looking at the data in that way, and how do we meet those coaches' needs?
Alicia, when you look at that map, are there specific settings that you really start with? Or like, is there kind of a prioritization of settings for you?
Well, when I look at it right now on the professional level, we're doing a pretty good job. We have at the Tucker Center a report card that comes out for Division I schools on female coaches, women in coaching, and we rate them A through F. And you can look forward to that in the summer if you want to jump on our website. We do put that out publicly. But where I think we need to get women involved is at all levels. And if we look at this right here, some of the issues do come in backyard play. Society doesn't value women and men the same. Our roles, we have a lot of barriers, a lot of gender stereotypes that we're, in the house doing these things and the guys are outside, or one of the partners is outside playing with the kids. So that's got to change, and we're trying to change that and show that women are really valued in sport. But then as we look at this, what we tend to see is women in the youth leagues get pushed down to that introductory, that younger level of coaching, even though they want to coach at the upper levels, but they maybe don't have the words to ask, or maybe they're not being valued. They're not seeing the speakers at the conferences as women. They're not hearing the leaders talk about opportunities for these women to engage and go up. They assume that because they have children, they're not going to be able to do it. So I think when I look at this right now, I see, we're getting some women in coaching. Ask a woman to coach is a good way to get them engaged, and then help them along the pathway and build community. Offer women's events. Make the bathroom menstrual friendly, so she feels comfortable there. Commit verbally that you're going to actually support these women, and as they go, you start to recognize they'll start to grow. And I'll talk later about actually developing the next generation of coaches.
Yeah.
And just to add in there, I know just touching on the backyard play, I think that was such an important piece. We holistically think, when we think about education, we think about every persona involved in the sport, and it was interesting to see only one person said they were a coach if they were coaching in the backyard. So I found that quite interesting, but the parent education piece is really important to us. So how do we provide enough resources and tools to parents to equip them for their children across multiple sports, not just a single sport, and support them? So we sort of look at things sport agnostic and look at things holistically. And I think that backyard play and parent education is such an important piece to supporting that player development pathway and framework there.
I think it's an increase in this bringing more awareness to that coaching can happen in a number of ways. It doesn't need to happen in the top right of this chart to be considered coaching, and that's something we work with in golf. You don't have to. It's traditionally an individual sport, but there's growing elements of team in golf. You don't have to be a coach of a team or a coach of an individual who's working on their skills specifically to be considered a coach. You can be the the person that greets somebody when they show up to a golf course or when they show up to any sports facility, and helping them feel welcome and showing them where the facilities are, where the locker room is, where they can store their bag. Those types of things are involved in the coaching experience because you're making it more comfortable for people to want to come back at any age. And to see this continue to shine light on the different ways, whether it's in the backyard and having some fun. And it can be as much about what you say and what you don't say or do. Sometimes coaching is doing nothing. Yeah. And when it comes to backyard play or the lower left of this graph specifically, sometimes it's letting the kids make up the rules, even though that's not how you play cornhole. But you know what? I'm just going to let the kids go ahead and figure out how to toss and make their own rules around this. And until there's a fight, I'm going to sit here and say nothing. And I think that is coaching. Yeah. And the more we can broaden that definition, the more people can start getting more and more comfortable being a coach and recognizing as a coach and applying those skills across this entire chart.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of pause this conversation. I'm going to ask you to just have a reaction with the person next to you. Just have a little 2 minutes, like just reflect, like what does this make you think about? What does it trigger for you? Like where do you show up on this map? And then we'll come back. Yeah, 2 minutes, very quick. Maybe a chance to drink some water. Okay. So, if we could just come back now. One of the things that I'm most interested in is, again, how does this make you think about your environment? So I would love, not a question, but more of a comment, because a question will continue us on. But I would love one comment at least. Yep.
Yeah, this guy, Wooden, was a basketball coach. And in his book, Wooden, what he wrote is the most important coach that any children should have is their parents.
Yeah.
Because by the time they get to real coaches, it's often too late.
Thank you for that.
Does anyone want to be
One more here. Yeah.
our bike runner today?
I think we'll probably be okay without it. I think we'll probably be okay. No. Oh, right. Yeah. Got it. We are going to have to use the mic. Yeah.
Hello. So, I was actually saying hi to my coworker back there, but I will make a comment. So, I think kudos to that comment about the parents, because that's an important component, and you also highlighted that. And I think that as a community, we don't do a well job with equipping the parents in that backyard play. But also, I know in the community that I represent, which is Akron, Ohio, a lot of our youth programs and our in-town leagues, you know, the box that they check off is, I'm interested in volunteering. And then as a community, we don't equip them with what is needed, in my opinion, as a coach. So I think that there's a huge opportunity to really identify what are we doing in all three of those backyard youth and in-town leagues. Travel clubs, those are a lot different than those first three buckets. And as
That's
you
right.
mentioned earlier, the second half is a lot different as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just hold that here. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on because we have a couple more to get through. And I will say that, you know, if we think about settings as one context for understanding coaching, we can also think about athlete development pathways. What's the age and stage of the young person that we're working with? And so, you know, when you start thinking about this, you're immediately, if anyone is in the session this morning, the sort of American development model kind of conversation about, you know, the young people that we're working with that are being coached are obviously at different places in their experience. And this reflects a sort of synthesis of many different American development models into a way of thinking about groups of coaches. And so, you know, on the far left, you have participants who are just entering into the sport, right? I think what you probably capture immediately is that that is not just young people. There are many adults who enter into a sport for the first time and are coached. And again, I would give golf and tennis two really obvious examples of beginners who are entering into sport for the first time as an adult. And those people are being coached. The question is, if you are coaching an adult who's a learner, a beginner, and a child who is a learner, what do they share and what is different, right? That's an interesting coach development problem, right? That our system would have to be intentional about, because that coach, again, might have adults, retired adults in the morning and young learners in the afternoon. What's consistent, what's different, and is our system equipped to help them? And then obviously you can go down this path. The middle population is our, what I'm calling active participants, right? These are folks who have moved past entering into the sport and have moved into I enjoy the sport, I want to keep playing the sport. I'm not in this competitive space, right? And the word competitive, again, some may disagree with that as the term for the red box. You know, some might prefer, you know, train and compete, which is the technical term that USOPC uses, because they're more likely to be specialized, they're more likely to do year-round sport, they're more likely to have an aspiration to play at a higher level, potentially college, or even just varsity high school, which I think is aspirational, or even just in high school in general. The issue, one group that's not here, are the early specializers. Right? So I have not created a bucket for early specializers who you can see that kind of gap below the red where that's probably where they would sit, right? Not all early specialization is inherently bad. There are some sports where early specialization is appropriate for elite performance. We think about historically gymnastics being the most obvious one. But by and large, our field has acknowledged very rightly that early specialization is not something that we're endorsing, but it happens. And so if it happens, how do we coach it? And how do we think about the people who are coaching early specializers, right? Do we coach them in the same way that we coach the competitive athletes? Or do we coach them in the way that we want to coach our active participants? This is why these things are interesting. I'm not presenting any answers here. I'm more presenting questions. Which would help you think through this. And then obviously, you know, performance and high performance reflects, you know, performance would reflect more like your college athletes, your junior national teams, and high performance would reflect your senior national teams and your professional athletes. From a youth sports perspective, we're interested in foundation, participation, and competitive coaches. And so I think there's an interesting conversation now to have about how do we construct our coaching strategy in a way that accounts for the differentiation needed to meet different youth needs. I will just finish with this because I'm going to ask Anthony to talk. Think about a coach who has to coach multiple intersecting abilities in one team or setting. And I think this is a really interesting one. Folks, if you get a chance, watch a documentary called Home Court. It's I just saw it at South by Southwest EDU. It tells the story of a high school girls basketball team in LA that has a phenom type of top player on their team, 3 or 4 club players, and a whole bunch of beginners in one team. That's really challenging for a coach. That's really, really challenging. So, Anthony, you all have done a lot of thinking about kind of athlete development from beginner stages all the way up. Like, you've constructed new ways of thinking about ADM in the context of golf. Can you just talk about kind of how this fits into some work you guys are doing?
Yeah, so when you look at something like this, golf over the last 20 or so years has seen an incredible boom of technology, hardware, software, investment, research into the high performance side, the red squares you see there. The amount of money in professional golf has exploded over the last 20 years. So naturally, a lot of the coaching started to chase that. So as we had new coaches coming into the space, they felt, oh, if I'm not buying the latest and greatest technology and keeping up with that and using that in my everyday coaching, I'm going to fall behind. And I've heard plenty of coaches over the years talk about, if you're not using this, then you're just guessing. Where we haven't historically spent a lot of time is in the left side of this, the foundation coaching, participation coaching. But over the last 6-7 years, through the work with the American Development Model, integrating that, we were able to bring a lot of attention to the fact that treating a beginner 6-year-old golfer the same way you would a tour player is not the best way to generate golfers for life or to generate well-rounded humans or athletes. And there was an individual golfer, some of you may have heard of, named Tiger Woods, who at the age of 3 succeeded and became arguably one of the greatest of all time using the approach of, I'm just going to train like a professional athlete from the age of 3. But for every Tiger Woods, there's millions of youth who hate it, who resent their parents, who get burnt out, and quit maybe all sports, not just that chosen sport. So the American Development Model has helped us shine a light on the fact that like the right experiences at the right ages, like we really need it in golf. It was fantastic for our sport because of the conversation that had been happening over the last 20 years. And it is, we have, of our member organization, we're making great progress. We have a small certification around ADM. We're working to activate them, not just on what are the right activities, but how to apply them, pairing coaches locally across our 41 sections we have across the country, as well as some of our staff. One of my teammates, Becca Bailey, is here, who leads a lot of our coaches around both our programming and our coaching to help be better at retention in the sport. And not just our sport, all sports, because it is valuable to have a new golfer start this year and to play for life. But it's also really valuable to have somebody try golf for a little bit, but get excited about movement, and then go play basketball and maybe be competitive at basketball. And then when they're done being competitive at basketball, they still have a love for sport. And we hope that they remember the amount of fun that they had playing golf, because golf's a lifetime sport. And as it keeps coming up in the conversation, there's a lot of benefits to golf and tennis being lifetime sports, to all of the work that this group and all of those in sport do.
Can you just talk a little bit about how ADM shows up now, like how these things show up in your coach education?
So I mentioned we have the certification around ADM. We've started, which was an online certification. It worked great. We had, really good reviews from all the coaches going through it. A lot of people that have completely changed what they're doing. But one of the pieces of feedback we got was, that was great, but I just don't know how it's going to work for us. Or I'm not sure how I'm going to explain to the parents why using hula hoops and throwing footballs and working on skipping and hopping at the golf course is going to help them become a golfer. So we had pushback there. So one of the things that we've done over the last 2 years was start delivering this training in person. So mainly in the off season, when it's quiet at places, getting a group of coaches together and teaching about the American Development Model, a little bit about what it's all about, but very heavy on the application. This is how you would set up activities for 8-year-olds during a 1-hour golf class. All right, we're going to shift a little bit as you walk through the pathway. Here's how you do it for somebody that's going to be a little bit more competitive in looking at college golf. And so helping the coaches see how, because it might be winter in a ballroom, you can do these activities pretty much anywhere. And so when the weather's great and you can do them outside, it was that aha moment for some of like, oh, this wasn't, I was thinking about it with a very fixed mindset. And through working with my peers in person, doing it myself, we've had a lot of success with getting people more excited about the application, which gets us one step closer to actually making change in the way people coach.
Other panelists, thoughts about this coach and participant pathways framework?
I can talk a little bit about on the girls' side and the women's side. So our goal is to get more girls participating and to get more women engaged. And what I do with Coaching Her is I work with NGBs, with high school leagues, with the state leagues, with clubs across the country, and try to help them implement Coaching Her, which, and especially our 6 foundational modules that really attack the stereotypes, the biases, the barriers that girls experience, and recognizing the hidden identities of girls, of what goes on behind the scenes, like maybe they have a really bad period, or maybe they're in an abusive relationship, or whatever it is. And then supporting girls' needs, which is our core foundational modules. And so when we look at like the ADM, I've been talking with Jordan at the USOPC to how do we actually expand that to meet the girls where they're at? Because sport has pretty much, the narrative's been male. And so how do we normalize females in the ADM and the things that they go through and how they experience sport? Because it's not necessarily the same. And so how do we meet that and teach our coaches and educate them and have them grow to understand girls? And then those girls have the opportunity to have a better environment and stay in the game a little bit longer, which then again increases our rates of women that are going to be in the leadership positions.
Thank you. Cam?
And I guess just to add to that, sticking with the theme of golf, we've recently just started working and partnering with an organisation called the First Tee. And they're see a few people nodding who aren't familiar with it. A fantastic youth sport organisation in golf and more at the participation level. And one of the nice things they've done is they've been able to, looking at that early participant stage, really define education for athletes or the participants of the sport, but also the coaches at all those different stages. And they do something really nice in stepping through education for 6 to 8-year-olds, 9 to 12-year-olds, 13 to 15-year-olds, and then 16 and 17-year-olds. Then they also apply the same sort of methodology to their coaches as well. So it's really great to see such a fantastic youth sport organisation stepping through those different stages. And I know Anthony and the team there work pretty closely together and share some ideas. And it's a fantastic organisation to see how they're working through that.
We're going to keep it moving, and I'm glad that we're sort of transitioning here into not just sort of who are we coaching, where are we coaching, where are they? Let's think about the coaches themselves and the experience of coaching. And so the next one is sort of a way of thinking about the coaching cycle. And again, nothing like earth-shattering here, but I think there's a couple things that I want to highlight. So what this is a way of thinking about a season or a period of a program or a team, and the sort of sequence of starting, finishing, and then returning. And so this has got to have some really interesting, I think, educational implications. So, coach gets recruited, or person gets recruited to coach, they decide to join, let's say we've done a great job, we've got them in. Then there's this process that we have to go through, right? And maybe there's some vetting, there's maybe some hiring, even if they're a volunteer, there's some things we technically have to do. And then there's some kind of onboarding or orienting process we have to do. Then the season starts. But season doesn't mean that the practice of coaching starts. That might mean like now I'm officially on board. Now I can engage in the process of planning or receiving the plan to then enact. And so that initiation process sets you up for then that that first practice or that first opportunity or that first lesson or that first session. And then you've got the season itself, right? Whether it's some combination, again, maybe it's not a season, maybe it's just a series of sessions. It doesn't have to be, again, a competitive team in the traditional sense, but there's some period where the coaching, quote unquote, work happens. And then that period ends, and then there's some concluding piece. The season officially ends. Maybe there's an evaluation. Maybe you self-evaluate. Maybe someone evaluates you. Maybe you just reflect, I hated that. That was awful. Or that was great. I want to do that again next year. And now you're into the off season. And you're into the off season, and maybe that means you go co-coach somewhere else. Or maybe you don't coach at all. But a decision at some point is made. I'm not coming back next year, or I am coming back. And it doesn't have to be next year. It could be next period. It could be that the next cycle might start in the summer, or the next cycle might start in the fall. It doesn't have to be just annuals. And then obviously now you've been quote unquote retained, and then you engage the cycle over again. And so, again, I think it'll be interesting to sort of get people's reactions to this and how accurate this is and what you would change about your context. But this raises a couple things for me. First question is, how much of our education do we try to pump in to the period between recruitment and season start or in season? Like, how much of the education are we like, it all has to be done then? We got to get all the training, we got to get we got to get everything done then. And that puts a lot of pressure on that period, right? It puts a lot of pressure on the organization. It puts potentially a load on the individual. So whatever we do there has to be really, really efficient. It's got to be really hard-hitting. It's got to be foundational. And then the question becomes, how do we use the rest of that period, right? How are we optimizing the rest of that period? And not just for education, support, community building, right? And so this is an open sort of way of thinking about the touch points with coaches, where we slot in different kinds. And I would encourage you to create some version of this for yourself. You don't have to use this one, but it would potentially provoke for you as a person responsible for coaches some of the organizational decision-making around how to map onto coach needs. I do want to give Cam a chance to chat a little bit about this, and I am curious about your all's reactions, but you live in the world of design, of working with organizations to design coach education in particular. Share some thoughts with the group about, how that might connect to what you see here.
Yeah, thanks, Vince. And I think what we're seeing here is, to your point, a lot of it is crammed into the start of the season. We're now seeing a lot of organisations, I don't want to use the word pivot, but move to ongoing learning and education across the season and continuous learning. Chatting with Anthony earlier on, I know continuous learning and education is a key part of what they do at PGA of America. And talking with a few people in the room over the last couple of days, we've started to see how organisations are moving to CEU or continuous education units and tracking of that. In Australia, we call it continuous professional development, same, different language, but just seeing how organisations are moving to that and ongoing assessment and re-evaluation. We're now seeing organisations back at home, I'll reference one that we work with in Football Australia or soccer, they've really moved to more away from a linear coach education pathway to a choose your own adventure. And if you go back to that first slide you touched on, Vince, the key one there is where we've got a person coming in at a junior level and a person coming in at a senior level, how we can actually choose different education modules that's relevant to us as an organisation, and still obtain the same level of qualification and still obtain the same level of training and education, but relevant to the community that I'm actually coaching.
Can you just give an example of, like, when you say continuous learning, or like, what can you give an example of, like, something quite practical that people are doing? Is it like micro learning? Is it like,
It's definitely going down the pathway of micro-learning, so continuous bite-sized learning modules. I think people want to be able to access it anywhere, anytime, whether it's on a mobile device, but be able to do it in a short, practical way that's giving that continuous learning and education to the person. And we're seeing that consumed in different ways. It might be a short webinar, it might be a short bite-sized e-learning module. It's a combination of those things across sports.
Yeah. I'd love to give you all a chance to, again, react in your pairs again. Just what does it make you think about? And we'll come back and pull some of your thoughts from the audience. So have a little chat with the person next to you. Okay, let's come back. Got to keep us on this time. I know the panel has some thoughts, but I want to hear from the audience before we let them. Maybe these will come out. Yeah. Wait, I've got to.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Gordon from Charlotte, North Carolina. One thing that we've seen, and I was just telling my talking group this past weekend, is we do all of the things from recruitment to start a season, the background checks, the training. It's the start of the season, in season, where coaches have human error. Like, they just have a bad day. And that bad day could be going off on a kid, getting too competitive, where in our instructional league, it's all about joy and fun. And he kind of, had a switch and he just goes in on the kid. And that's what we need help, he's a good person, salt of the earth woman coach, but they just have their moment where it's like, how do you recover? And not just throw them out. And so that's where we need help.
Yeah.
Any
And
thoughts?
would you view that, like, what would be the ideal kind of help?
Yeah, so that's
Because
the
that's
question.
that's
Yeah.
like where it's going, right? But I mean, for you,
Yeah.
is that sort of a capacity improvement? Is that some guidance that you would want to help you solve that problem? Is it like you just want guidance
I
in
think
answering
when
it?
the gentleman said the bite-sized learning, like
Right,
I know
oh,
for
yeah.
me, it's learning in the car on my way to practice, like throwing on a podcast, because I spend a lot of time in my car. So and then for me, like as the leader, I'm trying to remember that everybody doesn't learn like I learn. So like I learn by being in it, making the mistakes. But when you're dealing with some of the certain type of kids, if you make that mistake, it could cost you a kid, which then cost you a team and cost you. It's like
The way I would just very quickly respond is thinking about, like, because we can't get all of the education and all the preparation done, particularly for like early coaches, because we can't get it all done at the beginning of their coaching experience, there's gonna be mistakes. The question is, how do we obviously prevent the catastrophic mistakes, right? And I think we know very often what those are. What are the minor mistakes we're willing to live with that are just, we know are gonna happen, and we don't have the capacity to teach them? Who does have the ability to teach everybody everything in that very first season? But if you get them to come back for the second season, can we use that sort of ongoing cycle? And obviously, I think we're recognizing that, and I know there's some comments that we said about, like, are there some things we can anticipate happening and build in our drip? I know you want to talk about your slow drip, like your drip feed of learning.
Yeah, I think one of the things when I'm hearing this is that coaches need to be coachable. Leaders need to be coachable. And if we can role model that to our kids and our students and our athletes that we're working with, if they're accountable for their action and they are transparent and honest, apologize, step up, and then there's a community, maybe it's a coffee talk. You guys meet on lunch over Zoom, coffee talk, 30 minutes, talk through what's happening, how to handle the situation, thoughts. That's a good learning, because what I've known is 75% of the knowledge base that coaches get are from conversations with other coaches. So you can help and peer mentor those coaches. But what I have found as we work with organizations across the United States is I'm in a discovery process of learning how and what works. And what I've come across on successful programs is a slow drip. And a slow drip is good content. And a lot of it's happening off season, or it's good content where you're starting to just maybe take a couple modules or a couple courses, and then maybe that's January and February, and in March you have maybe a little meeting where you discuss it and you get into the depth of it. And it's depth where you're growing as a human being, right? So you're growing as a parent, if you're a parent and a coach and a leader, and as somebody who maybe has a job outside of coaching, you're growing. And that's really important. So the slow drip as we go along is really, really important. And it really starts to offer value. And it gives people the opportunity, when you have community, to value their experiences, and they have a voice, and now you're welcoming everybody into the room, and everybody's sharing and feeling valued, and they want to stay. So when people feel valued, they'll stay.
I think that's really great, and I love the sort of, just that metaphor, the slow drip, because I think it makes so much sense. And especially if it can be anticipated and connected to practices and decisions we know are going to come up. We already know you're going to get in that situation where you're going to be just upset by one of your players. Like let's pump that in.
Yeah, and so one of the things, and it kind of builds on the slow drip, and when you look at the cycle on the right, is understanding what is the right education and curriculum to give at certain points in the journey. And in the recruitment phase, one of the things in the recent research that we've done is we've asked all our types of coaches, the current coaches and potential coaches across a span from parents to community to the professionals, what type of education are you most interested in receiving? And we asked about working with youth, working with adults, working with diverse groups, basic technique, drills, all those type of things. The thing that rose to the top for our parents and community coaches was CPR and first aid certification. And knowing that little nugget as maybe that lure in to the education, to get them in at that recruiting stage, plus what we deem is absolutely necessary, safe sport, before you're entering a course, coupling those two programs together potentially could be what we need to get new people into the sport who we can trust on a court because they're now safe sport certified, and then we can deliver more education and continue those fundamentals and techniques along the way and in season and beyond.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jake. Does anyone else have a comment or reaction? Yeah.
Hello. Just on the adding to the safe sport note, something we were talking about is the duplicative nature of some of the trainings. And when you have a coach who's like, hey, I'm going to do this out of the goodness of my heart, and I only have a few hours a week, but then we dump hours and hours of training on them before they can start. And so if I coach field hockey, if I'm already safe sport trained, and then my high school asks me to do another training for the high school and another training to be California CIF compliant and another training for national high school sports training, and like all of a sudden I've watched hours and hours of videos that go over the exact same information. Yeah. How do we help coaches say, like, I'm already safe sport trained, so I only need to do these additional things?
I'll just jump in there quickly, and I know there's some of the safe sport education team floating around here today, so feel free to track them down and ask them that question. But secondly, to that point, that they are certainly working in a way of being able to share that information not across sports and across sports in NGB landscape, but across other bodies as well. And I know they're also working on the redevelopment of some of their education courses to streamline that process. We're only just talking during one of those breakout sessions and previously around the amount of time you have to do a course for and how many units that counts towards and training and so on. But I think there's certainly work being undertaken to help support that moving forward and sharing of that as details across sports for sure.
Yeah, the credentialing conversation about, you know, not just sort of like how do we document what's been trained, but how do we avoid the problem of redundancy is a critical issue in the broader landscape. I mean, this is why we need the kinds of shared conversations across boundaries, across settings. I want to say a couple more things before I move to the next one. One is I want to plug How to Coach Kids because that's something we have worked actively on, and really Kelsey and Nike and USOPC have been very active in trying to solve one aspect of this problem, which is, you know, that recruitment into season start period, offering something that's super quick hitting, well developed, free 30-minute parent volunteer first time coach. Like, that's perfect for that group, right? And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like what we slot into that period needs to really be sort of very intentional and well designed. But I will also come to the kind of coach developer in me, which is we've learned from decades of research into coach development that there are critical pieces. One is reflection, guided reflection. To Alicia's point, engaging in discussion with peers to talk through the problems of practice. And so community of practice models. Anyone in here familiar with the term communities of practice? Right. So this is a very well-developed idea in coach education. We're playing with some stuff with Anthony around introducing communities of practice with the ADM question, but there is still no substitute for trying stuff, reflecting on it, talking about it with peers, and that can be facilitated at a local level, either by a person who facilitates or the group themselves. 3 people coming together for lunch to talk about coaching. That can happen today at no cost. And it is one of the most well-established phenomenons in coach development. The question is, can it be facilitated well to solve problems that are happening in your community, like going off on kids and how to respond to certain situations? That's where organized facilitators play a key role. Okay, I want to transition to our last one, and then I know we're almost done. Home stretch, 4th quarter. Some of you, I jumped to this earlier, and I didn't mean to. Okay, this is a real pullback, okay? There's some work happening right now in the Million Coaches Challenge, thinking deeply about long-term needs for the field, thinking deeply about how to continue to address systemic barriers in certainly coaching, coach education, coach training. Some really good thinking, some really good thoughtfulness happening there. One of the things that we've tried to contribute to the conversation is really thinking about what we mean by coaching ecosystem and who the players are, right? Because it's one thing to be like, this needs to change. It's another thing to say, these groups need to do that change. And that's harder to figure out. And so this is, again, a value-neutral tool that tries to sort of capture who are some of the main actors. And so the blue boxes sort of more represent sort of sub-sectors of the coaching ecosystem. The closer to the bottom you are, the closer you are sort of to the coach. The higher you are, the farther you are from the coach. And you know, there's no other, the little kind of spin-offs, the black kind of lines reflect examples. So it's not an exhaustive list. And so what you obviously see are, I think there's 16, what we believe to be 16 sort of core groups of actors in the ecosystem. And, you know, we would probably some organizations are not necessarily mapping neatly onto a blue box. So I would say that we sit in multiple boxes as Aspen. We sit in a sort of civil society human rights piece. We sit in data and research because we produce the National State of Play report. You know, one of the questions, this opens questions around what is the responsibility? We've been talking a lot about the responsibility of the organization who's hiring, and that's the program operators. But think about how many other entities play a role. And what role might they play to help those operators who are working with coaches on a day-to-day basis? What could apparel and equipment manufacturers do? What could insurance companies do? Anyone here in insurance? I'll tell you that insurance has been one of the most eye-opening things I've come across from a coach behavior perspective because of the risk mitigation imperative that naturally sits in their space. If we can get coaches doing, for example, injury prevention practices, then we can improve coaching and reduce athlete injuries. Well, insurers have an ability to act in that space. Clearly have a plan from government to... Yeah, I think it's probably like less planned than maybe. But I do think that kind of there's probably a little bit more structural on the left, and kind of as you move to the right, less policy oriented and more kind of human oriented, or although data and research kind of lives in multiple buckets, but yeah. Alicia, like, yeah, you're living in this every day, so like you're trying to navigate all this stuff. Share some thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a perspective on more of a gender lens on this, what it's like to be a woman in this space and working with girls and women and really focusing on that. And I'm going to start with the data and research. So we do research, but a lot of people do research in organizations. And how do we disseminate that and really get it out to you instead of having it sit in a journal on the shelf somewhere? So our goal at the Tucker Center is actually to take that research and, you know, we're applying it with Coaching Her and Body Confidence Sport. But how do we get other organizations to do the same because that research is out there? And then when we look at technology and education from a woman's point of view and a girl's, when we create our content, and you might want to think about this in your own organizations, who wrote your content? Is it reflective and being written by a diverse community of which you want to serve, not who you serve right now, but who you want to serve. And is it really reflective of that? Then as you move to like the apparel and the equipment companies, for us it's, are they investing in girls and women in sport and what we're doing? And then are they showing them? Are they building apparel for women? Are they creating shoe brands? Are they recognizing that our bodies are different than male bodies? And so are they adjusting to that and investing in us? Are they investing in the female athletes so that we can see them? And then you look at like sports facilities. Are they opening sports facilities and giving us equal space, good times? I mean, as a high school athletic director, I had to fight for that all the time. As we look at coaching education and we look within our local clubs, are we showing those pathways? Are we welcoming in all of the coaches? Are we creating a safe environment for everyone? Are we really thinking and opening our lens to a bigger picture of what does that mean? How do we redefine sport? How do we meet those coaches where they're at and the community and the families? And when we look at like the NGBs and the bigger organizations, you know, are they really committing? Not just saying it, but are they committing to it? Are they making choices that are reflective of that? Are they consistently communicating with their community that they're going to make a difference and that they're trying to learn and evolve and be transparent about that because they're not always going to get it right? And there's simple things that can happen on the women's side, like can they have a women's only coaching certification class? I'm part of the Wisconsin Women's Soccer Advisory Council, and we started that, and it's a huge hit, and we're starting to grow up the levels of who's going to come to the like different levels of coaching, and it's really impactful because for a woman to come to the coaching certification process, and it's one woman with 50 men, it's quite intimidating, and they don't sign up. So when we offer those opportunities, it changes the game. And even women's events. Do we have a women's organization within your club? Or in the NGB? Do we have an event for women where we can come together and get out of that male-dominated space right now and come together and fill our tank? Because if we do that, we will stay. We will fill that tank and we will stay because we feel supported and valued in those moments and we can come back to our club and to our organization and share what we've learned. So it really does take a whole encompass. But one other thing that I think is really important that's not on there is corporate businesses. Yeah. So corporate businesses need to also start to realize that by coaching and getting their employees to come coach, because not all of coaches can just coach. There's not enough money there. But if those employers can come and value and respect and realize this is a way to give back and change society, if we can get those corporations to embrace that and let those coaches out a little early to go coach, and invest in those coaches, that would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, I know some folks that have built-in programs like that that really sort of value community engagement for employees. There's some really good ones. I know we're just at time. I'd love just maybe one or two comments, a reflection, a question. Yes, Sheila.
As we talk about having a best-in-class set of coach education across all of the arenas that are relevant for being a good coach, coaching for developmental, for the long game. We have USTA, for instance. I'm on the Sports Science Commission, just for the record. We're taking coach education in-house, right? We're building out, and we have excellent content. So sport agnosticizing the content. Who pays for that? I've written coach education. I care about the most eyeballs getting on it, having it be translated across audiences for learning styles and across different sports. But like the big question, which we don't have time for now, is how do we sport agnosticize the best in class so that we have sort of a menu of the best things. I know Million Coaches Challenge is working on this. And then to Alicia, nice to meet you across the room. For Jake and Alicia, as we're developing our USDA-focused coach education, I'd love to understand how integrating content for female coaches is being considered, thought, what is being set up for to increase the number of female coaches? Because as you said, when women coach girls, it's stickier. There's retention is higher, and girls are dropping out of the 14s, 16s. We're getting fewer competitors in the tournaments. So this is an issue for all of us, and we know that girls participating in sports leads to better health, better mental health, behavioral health, physical health, leadership capacity, all these things that are going to drive our country and our society and drive down costs also from an economic standpoint. So anyway, I'm just teeing those up. I know we don't have time to talk about all of them, but these are the things I'm thinking about. Thanks to everybody for being here, and especially our panelists in Aspen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We probably are out of time, and I know that you are all off to the rest of your day. Maybe some of you are going to the game tonight, so I will be there. Thank you for joining us. A round of applause for our panel. Again, just really appreciate you joining here at the end of the day. A lot of food for thought, I'm sure. A lot of reflection and rumination. I'll hang around for a little bit, but thanks again, panel. Great job. And enjoy thanks for coming to Project Place Summit.